Oh dear. Oh, jeez. I can't get over it. A bit overawed with all these bikes sitting here. Absolutely. It's unbelievable.
So what a great collection of bikes we've got here, Steve, behind us. And today we're going to talk a little bit more about them in a unique period of your working life and the creation of some of the world's finest race bikes, right out of here, right out of this workshop by you.
World famous.
So, yeah, I think that that era, following the 70s two-strokes, and then following through with your partnership with Rod Coleman and with yourself and the building of these machines here and the riders who rode them. It was a unique period in certainly New Zealand and in a sense world motorcycle racing, because in many cases they were competing against the factory teams, they were beating them.
Well, number one, the aluminium monocoque was the start. We built that one for Dave Hiscock, and he actually did win one of the super races in Britain with all the factory bikes there, which is, I think, was Donington Park, but I can't be sure. But this was number one for Dave, and he did so well on it.
Yes,
It's a great machine.
Yeah. And that was a bit of a showstopper at the Isle of Man, I understand, when it first arrived. It had been built and arrived at the Isle of Man.
Yeah, Dave said a lot of people came round to his pit. He did tell me about that. But it was a monocoque, meaning that the whole structure of the bike is the petrol tank, and the motor literally bolts up to it. So the motor's a stressed part of the thing, but it's part of the assembly. And we had a single shock suspension, rear suspension, with a linkage. Yeah,
it was fast.
It was very fast.
Very fast.
It had Pop's Yoshimura motor.
Yes.
And the whole deal was put together because of Rod Coleman.
Yes.
Now, he was the guy behind it. He said, would you do it?
Yeah.
I said to him, Dave's happy enough to ride one. Shall we do it? And Rob was 100% behind getting stuck in, building it, and then he backed it all the way through, which was fantastic.
Yes, yeah. And essentially that was a one-off build.
A one-off, yeah.
And the other three that we've got behind us were a lead up to the Plastic Fantastic in sequence.
Well, Dave did so well on it that he could have had a factory ride with GB Suzuki. Unfortunately, Barry Sheen took the ride, so Dave missed out. And so we said, well, what can we do about it? Because he wanted to get back and have another crack at getting into the factory and getting into the racing over there. And so we decided to build a fiberglass machine, a chassis, instead of the aluminium. It takes a lot of building those aluminium monocoques, and to make it a mould off it, and fiberglass was pretty straightforward, I thought, at the time. But of course, fiberglass wasn't strong enough. We tried carbon fibres, we tested carbon fibres with a sledgehammer, and it shattered. And so we finally ended up with the Kevlar. How did I get hold of Kevlar? I got the yachting guys, and I've forgotten his name. They were building yachts up in Auckland, beautiful. And they used Kevlar there. And we did it with Kevlar. It was quite interesting. I could talk more about the bikes if I could stand up and tell you about it. But,
and the Kevlar bike was known as the first Kevlar motorcycle, and that was the one that won the Inventor of the Year.
Oh yes, that's right.
All categories.
Well, we took the mould off this aluminium bike, and that's the original pre-production monocoque sitting behind us. It's just all the stuff on it, and is all the stuff that I had sitting in the workshop, and I've just bunged it on.
Right.
So I'd like to have everything in one place.
Right.
But the later model seat and all that sort of stuff.
Yes.
That was the start of it anyway. Sorry.
Yes, so the Kevlar and the aluminium, as they have become known, and the riders on them, and that sequence through the 80s. And so we come to Dave Hiscock and his record through from where he went and how that unfolded. And take us briefly through, Steve, his record on the aluminium to give.
Okay. Yeah. Well, look, his first ride, he took the aluminium monocoque over in the suitcase because we were a bit late. We built the aluminium. He took that over in a suitcase. Pop Shimara provided the engine from America and flew it over to England, and they put them together. And his first race was the Isle of Man.
The Isle of Man,
which is pretty hectic when you think about it.
Hell of a place to start.
Complete prototype out there.
Yeah.
And he did very well. Got a third in the Formula One, which was nice.
Yes.
And eighth, I think it was, in the Formula, whatever the other race it was there.
Yeah.
Then he went to Donington and a few other of the major race meetings in England, like the British Series. And Silverstone is my favourite circuit, of course.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, he raced at Silverstone.
Yeah.
And we were over in Britain a year later, and I went to see an old apprentice friend of mine, Dave Ems. I said, "Hi, Dave." He said, "Hi." And we talked about, "Have you been racing lately?" And he said, "Yes, we went to Silverstone. And the best race I've ever seen was a race, the Formula One race at Silverstone." I said, "Is that right?" He said, "Yes. There was a chap, one of the Kiwis over there, you must know him, Dave Hiscock." I said, "I certainly do know Dave." He said, "It was the best race I've ever seen, and this is a guy who's been going to races since 1954, way back." And he said he was riding this wonderful Suzuki, factory Suzuki, aluminium Suzuki. I said, "Oh no, Dave, that was we built that in my shed at home in Brunswick." And he said, No. And he completely disagreed. He said, "No way in the world, that was a factory." He was up there and he was second at Silverstone, I think.
I hope you supplied some evidence to
I
him,
didn't.
did
Never.
you?
I would never follow up things like that. I said, "Okay, Dave, lives at that." But he did go right through the whole series on this bike.
Yeah.
So it's been round Portugal, Britain, Isle of Man. He took it back to Australia on the way home.
Yes.
And cleaned up in the Swan Series there, which is a big time in America, in Australia.
Yes. Yeah.
And he came back and did New Zealand Series, which was terrific as well. So that's this little beauty here. I'm so wrapped with this bike. But when he came back, we had to work out how he could get back next year. And unfortunately, Dave missed out on the factory ride with Suzuki. Barry Sheen took the ride instead of Dave. And so we decided to do a plastic, just for a bit of a laugh, more than anything. That's what it was. Just to make it outstanding. And so we did the first one, which is that bike up the top. The chassis of that is the original chassis. The bits on it are all stuff we had in the shed, and I've just put them on for the filming. But the original was that monocoque chassis, which worked.
Yes.
And so we tested it a little bit once it had cured properly, because it took a bit of curing. And then we bought this fantastic. A chap came up and said, plastic fantastic, and that's how it got its name.
Yes.
And
did you build another prototype before you built the plastic, the Kevlar?
well, that was the prototype. The pre-prototype was just the chassis of that thing on the backdrop. But this is the real machine that came for it.
Yes.
This is this one here behind you, 91.
Yes.
It's that was called the pre-production bike, and we tested that one.
Right.
It was quite interesting, that one.
That found its way onto the roads. Am I right in thinking that
we put it on the road? But
Yeah.
when Dave tested that one, he took it to Manfield once again and did some laps on it, and it looked pretty good. He was pretty happy with it.
Yes.
And he said, "Yes, I'll have one of those, thanks."
And that's
So
where,
that one was the
yeah.
prototype, and it was just
Right.
so it's mine now, or Ralph's and mine.
Yes.
And so we built this thing, the plastic fantastic, for Dave. He sat in it, got the feel of the seat and everything like that,
Yes. Yeah.
and put it all together. And he took it over to Britain. He was in South Africa at the time.
Right.
So it went to South Africa. The motors came in from Pops again, once at Pops Yoshimura again. And he put it all together, took it to the Isle of Man, did a standing start on it in the race, nearly 114, just off 114 miles an hour, on a plastic chassis. Brilliant.
Yeah. Steve, I'm interested in your reference to the monocoque model, which is really the key, in a sense, the key design introduction into what you did. Where did you, I mean, had there been monocoque examples built in the past, or were you breaking new ground?
Oh, there have been monocoque bikes, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Yeah.
Phil Irving did a Velocet, LE Velocet, which was monocoque.
Yeah.
There were lots of. It's just a way of doing something.
But in the 70s, 80s, particularly in the 80s period, around that period, it was more conventional bikes. But you were breaking new ground with, in a sense.
I hate to disagree with you, Brian.
No, please.
But, the Kawasaki had built they built a beautiful monocoque bike for the 500cc classes, and there were several. There was another company, which I can't remember the name of, was doing a 250 monocoque.
Right.
So it was really, I thought I was just following a trend.
But the use of Kevlar was...
they didn't have plastic, no, they were aluminium.
Yeah. So the use of Kevlar that was
something.
Groundbreaking.
But when when Dave and I talked about it, it's quite a lot to build these monocoques, the aluminium thing.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, we'll just make a fiberglass one and see how it works.
Yeah.
Which is what we did.
Yes.
And it did work.
Yeah. And after Dave had finished with that bike, as it were, Robert Holden came in, and he's a figure we need to talk about, because he was such a remarkable rider, particularly on the cemetery circuit here. I think he had more wins than anybody.
20 years he rode.
And I think the iconic shot that's on the signs at the cemetery circuit in Whanganui has Robert Holden on the Kevlar, on the plastic, coming through the S's. It's a signature shot, and we should see if we can find that and get it up there, because he was quite something.
No, well, David did all the sorting. He sorted it out.
Yeah.
After his big crash at Assen, which we found later, the crash must have pushed the swing arm up.
Right.
And it had twisted a beam that I have in there, which the linkage is mounted on. It twisted it, which made the progressive linkage not work properly.
Right.
We didn't find that out until Dave got back from Europe.
Yes.
But anyway, David sorted all the bike out, and Robert took it over.
Right.
And I think every race he rode in New Zealand, I think he won every race on this bike.
Yes.
What a rider.
Yes,
We took it over to Bathurst, and unfortunately the motor blew.
Yes.
And he didn't do the Bathurst race, which was a great shame.
No. Sadly missed, and he came through and won at the Isle of Man, Robert, didn't he? On a single
on the
back
Ducati,
in,
yes.
yes,
Gosh,
and the Ducati in that era of the
Yeah,
singles. and then sadly lost his life on the Isle of Man. So there's a special memorial to him on the cemetery circuit because he was such a remembered and revered figure there.
Absolutely. Well, Robert rode several of our bikes over the years. Dallas Rankine and Luke Taylor had a business called British Motorcycle Spares,
Yes.
and they sponsored Robert
Yeah.
on the Duke of Wellington, which he
Yes.
never really raced,
Yes.
and the other one was called Fast and Fragile, which
Fast and
were
Fragile,
two
that's
lovely
right.
bikes that we
Yes.
built for
Yes,
Robert to
for
ride.
Robert, yeah.
And
Yeah.
well, that's just
Yes,
interesting.
yeah,
It's interesting.
yes. Well, thank you, Steve. This is the conclusion of this segment, and it's thank you for talking to us and sitting out here in the shed, which is not the warmest spot in the country right now, but I really appreciated the opportunity to talk with you about that most exciting period of
Certainly was.
New Zealand motorcycling and the stories there. So that's it for today. Thank you.
Okay, well, good one, Rob. Cheers. That's great.